Hello, I'm Simon Whistler. You're watching Today I Found Out, and in the video today, A Rose for Karl, an amazingly horrific love story. Born in Dresden, Germany in 1877, Karl Tanzler claims to have descended from aristocratic stock. Fanciful even as a child, in later years he recounted a story of being visited in his youth by a long-dead ancestor, Countess Constantina von Cosel. She gave him a vision of a beautiful, dark-haired woman who she said was his one true love. As a young man, he either forgot the vision, made the whole story up later in life, or decided to settle because in about 1920 he married a different woman. Together, although in stages, they immigrated to the US with their children and settled in Zephyr Hills, Florida in 1926. Perhaps realizing he couldn't avoid his fate, by 1927 Karl had left Zephyr Hills, although they didn't divorce, changed his name to Karl von Cosel, and made a new home in Key West, Florida, where he found work as an X-ray technician at the US Marine Hospital. A few years later, in 1930, a young, beautiful, dark-haired woman went to the hospital for treatment of a lung condition that was eventually diagnosed as tuberculosis. As X-rays were required, Maria Elena Milagro de Hoyos, also known as Helen, ran into Karl, who was totally awestruck. He claims to have instantly recognized her as the woman of his childhood dream. Although it's not clear if Karl ever told Helen about his supernatural vision, he was soon professing his love for the young woman and showering her with jewelry and clothing. As she continued to decline due to her illness, when he offered to make house calls to treat her, the help was eagerly accepted. More enthusiastic than educated, Karl's remedies were little more than additional X-rays and strange concoctions. Despite his and the actual doctor's best efforts, Helen died on October 25, 1931. Karl's offer to pay for her funeral was gratefully accepted by her family, and rather than settling for a simple grave, he built a sizable mausoleum. In gratitude, Helen's mother gave Karl some of Helen's hair as a memento, a decision the family later regretted. Visiting her crypt in Key West Cemetery nearly every night of the next year and a half, Karl later claimed that Helen's spirit visited him and asked him to take her out of the tomb. Naturally, he obliged, and in April 1933 he crept into the cemetery, presumably after dark, with a small wagon and secretly removed her body and took it back to his home. We can only assume that with the passage of so much time, dead Helen must have been quite a sight. To reverse the effects of time and decay, Karl employed a number of techniques, including reattaching her bones with wire and coat hangers and filling her now deflated torso with rags to give her the right proportions. Over these structural supports, Karl made a sort of skin out of silk, wax, and plaster of Paris, put glass eyes in her sockets, and fashioned a wig for her from the hair her mother had given him. Karl then dressed her in style, including jewelry, stockings, and gloves. To prevent any further decay and disguise the smell, Karl also employed a fair bit of preservatives, as well as disinfectants and perfumes. Not content to only be with dead Helen, Karl also hatched a plan to create a plane to carry her body, as he put it, high into the stratosphere so that radiation from outer space could penetrate Eleanor's tissues and restore life to her somnolent form. 7 years later, dead Helen's sister Florinda, after hearing some strange rumors of Karl's extracurricular activities, including someone spotting through a window Karl dancing with a life-size doll, she arrived at his home, demanding to see the doll. What she discovered was that it was no effigy of her sister at all, but the carefully preserved remains of Helen. The authorities, they were immediately notified and Karl was arrested, but the statute of limitations for grave robbing, it had already run out, so the charges were dropped. Later investigations revealed a bit of Karl and dead Helen's life together, which included dancing and spending each night lying in bed together. It's not clear if Karl engaged in necrophilia. While some researchers claim that a paper tube had been inserted into dead Helen's vaginal cavity, others claim that, as this evidence was only revealed in 1972, it was not credible. Even if true, this doesn't say one way or the other whether he had intercourse with the corpse, a paper tube being presumably uncomfortable. So let's move on from that. As if Karl's decoration of Helen's corpse wasn't enough, after the authorities were finished with the body, dead Helen was put on public display in a local funeral home. More than 6,000 people came to gape at her. She was finally laid to rest in 1940 in a secret location and given an unmarked grave. Karl was able to keep a death mask he had made of Helen, or dead Helen, it's not clear, and he attached this to a life-sized sculpture that he'd fashioned in her image. He returned to Zephyr Hills, where his wife, they had never divorced, apparently helped to support him, although they did live separately. His autobiography, Fantastic Adventures, was published in 1947, and he became a US citizen in 1950. Dying at home in 1952, Karl was supposedly found with his arms wrapped around a Helen doppelganger. However, the accuracy of this report isn't clear, and accounts from otherwise reputable sources further differ as to whether this was the death mask sculpture Helen or whether it was actually dead Helen, whom he had secretly reacquired somehow. So, I won't ask whether you enjoyed that video, but I do hope you found it interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already for brand new videos just like this every day of the week. Also, I'd like to take this moment to thank our patrons on Patreon. If you're interested in supporting us with a small and totally voluntary financial contribution each month, please do consider heading over to patreon.com/TodayIFoundOut. We've got loads of great perks lined up for people who support us, so please go check that out. There's a link in the description below. And as always, thank you for watching.